This is episode 1 of the Stodgify podcast. So thank you very much, Peter Pham, for joining us from Mart's Method. But going back into what we're discussing here, it's like, how does that natural law, how does all that, what you just said then, how does that come into, and how can you put that into this system, and how could we defend ourselves, or how could we fight back against these, against the system with what you just said? How does that, can you do that, and how does it work?
Yeah, great question, man. The system itself, in my opinion, is quite sick. And the way that I judge sickness is disconnection from that line of truth that I'm talking about. Yeah. And it's the same truth that all of our ancestors wrote about and spoke about and told stories about. And it's the same stories that exist cross-culturally throughout history and still exist today in slightly different forms. That's their ways of communicating the truth to us. If I compare that through line of truth, the stories of our ancestors, to the way that the legal system, for example, operates, there is a massive divide. And to me, I find it very difficult to work as a lawyer. I find it very challenging. I often feel very deflated and tired and drained because it feels like a system that is not conducive with who I am as a human being and who we are, I believe, as human beings. However, the word law stems from a Latin word that means immutable truth. And however distorted and disconnected and corrupted a system, the legal system might be, it's still the legal system of this society. So it's still this society's expression of law and truth. And as a lawman, as someone who cares about what's true, I have a role to play in there where, as best I can, I'm trying to represent the truth that I represent. And there is a way, there is a power to truth, no matter where it's spoken. It just doesn't always have the impacts or the effects that it should or that we might want. And that can be frustrating because sometimes it's like ignored or twisted or dismissed in that place because it's a threat to it. To go back to your question, it still has an impact in there, the truth, but just not in the way that you would always want or expect. So like, you might not win the case, but the judge is like, oh shit, there's a lot of people coming with these ideas at the moment. Society's going in a certain direction. Ultimately, they follow society because they have to. There's also the fact that a lot of people who are on a pathway of going towards that truth, like a lot of people are at the moment, like a lot of people are kind of awakening to what's important and searching for more healthy ways of being. They're still caught up in this system. So there might be a journey that they're on over here, but they've still got all these problems they need to deal with over here. So part of it's also important to walk with those people to sort that out so that they can free themselves up to go over here. I'm sort of trying to, I guess, explain what my job is in a way, I guess.
So what is your job? Actually, basically, tell us a bit about yourself. This is an extremely unconventional podcast or discussion. I'm very different to everybody else, as you would know, because we've met a couple of times before this. So there's no actual real structure to this. But all right, let's go into just tell us a bit about yourself, because I think that for me, everyone's important. But for me, like, you're an important human for me. You're an important person, you and your family, and the work that you've done, because some of the things that you did during the time through COVID over the last couple of years really sparked my attention and gave me a bit of courage and really helped me when I needed it. So that's why I feel like you're an important person in my life for that. And it was an honor to meet you that day. So let's go through, like, tell us a bit about yourself, like, and then go through just Mart's Method and how you came up with that name. And I think that'll all tie in nicely with all your natural law and a few other bits and pieces.
Yeah, bro. I'm grateful to have met you as well. A bit about myself. So I'm Coptic and Nubian, two groups indigenous to northern Egypt and southern Egypt, northern Sudan. My father is from there. My mother's from the Coptic lineage. Um, both people trace their lineage back in slightly different ways to the Kemetic people, which are the ancient Egyptian people. And I was born in Australia though, in Western Sydney. Um, my parents came here just before I was born, and we grew up very, very poor. And my dad also had some early dementia, so he started losing the capacity to do things when I was very young. And my mum has some physical disabilities as well and doesn't really speak English very well. So all of that kind of led to a childhood where there was a lot of financial stress. I felt like an outsider. Like I felt like I didn't belong here. I was very ashamed of my differences and got bullied a few times for being different, and it really fucked me up. And I, as a response to that, I really tried to like find out how to fit in. And for a while, was very disconnected from who I actually am because I was trying to fit in. And became very depressed, bro. Culminating in, I got very good at fitting in too. I figured out their system. I was like, oh yeah, I'm fucking mad at English. Like I know how to communicate. I got really good at writing. I got very good at people pleasing, like trying to, partly because my house had conflict in it as well, and I was like mediating it.
Yeah, mediating.
Yeah, but there's light and shadow. So the light is mediating and knowing how to avoid conflict, but the shadow is avoiding conflict. Sometimes it's fucking necessary. As I got older and stayed disconnected from who I was, I got more and more depressed. And the more I went in that direction, so one example is at one point I'm working in like a law firm. I hated the law degree as well, but then I skipping a lot of things. Working in a law firm, like super depressed, like fucking sucked. Like I wasn't happy at all. Didn't feel, and I felt like I was trapped, which was the most depressing part.
How old were you then?
Mid-20s, bro.
Mid-20s, yeah.
So it's 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
And then from there, I started to recognize over a period of time that maybe there wasn't like something wrong with me that I had to dilute or change to fit in. Maybe there was something wrong with the systems around me. So I started noticing things in the environment that I didn't agree with, didn't like, on totally different vibration to me. Like one example is going through the city and there's homeless people everywhere. And I've been very poor and we've been homeless for periods of time. And I'm like, how the fuck is everyone just walking past? Because I never went to the city much growing up. Like, how the fuck is everyone just walking past like on their phone or whatever and totally ignoring these guys that are like on the street, like with nothing to eat and like no shoes on and stuff. And it really fucked with me. And then I start to learn more about nutrition, for example. That was one of the early ones for me. And realizing that the way that we eat is actually disables us and dilutes us of our power.
Yeah.
Getting into like fasting and like different practices that helped me to understand more about who I was as a human being, and then simultaneously learning more about my culture and my heritage and the stories and the themes and the messages of that, and how applicable it was to my life, and how much more meaning that gave me than the stories I was hearing and had internalized from growing up in the system we live in. All of that led to a process where I came to understand that I'm a lawyer for a reason when I understood what a lawman is in ancient Egypt. And it's very similar to what a lawman is in indigenous culture here. Which is a keeper of law, somebody who actually defends and advocates for what's true.
Yeah.
Not somebody necessarily who like goes into this building and plays this game and tries to win, which is more like what it is here. That made me stop trying to escape being a lawyer and think about maybe I'm a lawyer for a reason, and build this purpose that I have now, which is that person who speaks the truth. And during COVID, I was already working as a human rights lawyer before COVID, but most, well, actually every single human rights practice in Australia is government funded because there's no money in it. Yeah. So you have to rely on grants from the government to work as a human rights lawyer, and they still do good work. Like they still do like, stuff around privacy and discrimination. And if someone has a dispute with a government decision, they might take that on, but there's limits to what they'll do, because ultimately their existence depends on the people that you're suing all the time and the people that always breach human rights, which is the government. Yeah. So
don't bite the hand that feeds you.
That's right. Yeah. And I started to run into that. Yeah. During COVID, there were two things going on. One was I was speaking out against what I thought was ridiculous and unlawful, and some of the stuff I was saying and writing went viral, and I was getting pulled into like disciplinary meetings and stuff. They're like,
with your law firm?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't a law firm. It was a government funded human rights specialist team in a government department. And
they're pulling you into meetings and just discussing with you, like,
yeah, they were like, you can't be saying this stuff because it's going to bring out, they were framing it like this. They were saying, oh, we're the public service, and we have to be seen to be generally in line with what the government's saying about things. And I was saying, I'm a human rights lawyer working as in a human rights team, and the rights that we say we're defending every day are literally being breached.
Yeah.
And you're saying we can't talk about it. So whatever story I had told myself that was going to be something that didn't happen, or that it was going to be fulfilling enough doing the good stuff they still do to override that compromise, kind of got shattered. And I realized I had a choice to make, which was maintain my integrity and have the ability to say what I know is true, or compromise that in order to have a secure job. Like my wife was pregnant at the time. Yep. She lost her job at the same time for a similar reason. No savings. So it's scary. But I knew, like we both knew, Sherry and I, we knew that you have to make the decision there to do what's true, because otherwise you get depressed. For me, that's how I think about it on that simple level, because that's what happens with me.
God bless you, man. That's not an easy decision.
Yeah.
That's not an easy decision to make, but if you went the other way and you shut your mouth and you kept on going and got to be careful with what I say. I don't want to say someone might get offended in this day and age, but if you weren't being true to yourself and you kept on going down that path, you would have ended up being depressed. You would have ended up being angry and all these things. So you ultimately chose, like you listened to yourself and said, no, I have to go down this path. So you heard your higher calling and you're listening to it and you're honoring and you walked that path. And that's extremely courageous. Yeah.
It was very liberating, bro. Like it was scary at the start. And then as soon as the decision was made, the sense of freedom and liberation was intoxicating. And I was riding this wave for like probably close to a year.
And this was all during COVID, yeah? So yeah. What timeline was this? Like during the lockdowns, after the lockdowns, before? Like we have these AD, BC times before this COVID stuff, you know? So like during what period was this?
So I was working in that human rights team from, I think, a couple of years before COVID. And then COVID hits. And as soon as it hit in 2020, I started speaking out against it.
On what platform, if you don't mind me asking?
I was posting like articles on LinkedIn.
Yeah, the LinkedIn.
And I was also helping people on the side. And sometimes they'd be like, oh, I do a podcast or whatever. Could we have a chat about what we're doing? And then I'd be like, yeah, all right, whatever. Like we do like a video together and stuff like that. And I don't know where they'd post it. And then and then it was in 2021. So after maybe 6 months of that or something, that I left and started my own firm. So that's kind of the timeline. Yeah. 2020, 2021.
And, but you had the backing of your family. So you had the backing of your wife.
Yeah.
She was pregnant. That would have been really scary, but you had her support.
Yeah.
And I guess you also, deep down, you had the support of all your ancestors and that inside you. You had, excuse me, you also had the support of all the Australian people that were trying to make sense of what was going on. So I don't really, with that, what I want to say is you sort of, I think you've earned the right through that to start going down the path of being a lawkeeper, of taking that on, and you're starting your apprenticeship as you go through. Okay, because that the ultimate, when you look in society and you look at the old times, the law keepers were the wise ones. That's why. But you look at judges in today's day; they've all got their headdresses and stuff like this. But that's still symbolic. That's symbolic of the wise people making the decisions. So you look at yourself now is like you're going down this path, and you say, no, I'm going down this path to actually to be this law keeper, to be someone that's of truth of law, and then we'll get into the name of your company or of your firm, or what you want to call it, Mart's Method, which I couldn't believe when I saw that. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But you're going down that path, and it's something that's truly, something to be embraced, and that's why I'm so thankful. So tell me a bit about your firm's name.
Yeah, man. Ma'at's method. Ma'at is the ancient Egyptian representation. Some people say God, but it's more like a representation of a quality of the divine, and that quality is truth. Truth and justice. Some people say balance. Some people say harmony. They're all kind of the same thing, and the one that speaks to me the most is truth. I think it's the one that encompasses it the best for me. So she represents truth. And the story is that at the end of this life, you go to the Hall of Justice, Ma'at's Hall of Justice, and she's sitting at the end of the hall with a scale. This is where the scales of justice comes from. And on the scale on one side is the feather of Ma'at, which she always wears. And on the other side, you place your heart. And if your heart is lighter than the feather, you pass on and essentially come closer to your full realization, which is God. So Ma'at's Method, I called it Ma'at's Method because that's what I'm trying to do. And you're right, it's a journey, man. And I'm at the beginning of a long journey. But what I'm trying to do is happening inside of me and externally in the world at the same time, because my journey along that path in the hall is mirroring whatever I'm supposed to be doing here as well. So, yeah.
I'm just really thinking about so if your heart is lighter than the feather, you go through. So I'm just trying to figure out, and I want to understand what makes a person's heart heavy. Is it lies? Is it living a life of regret? Having a heavy heart? So that's very interesting. So I think that all encompassing. It's not just. It's definitely a soul's journey. It's definitely your heart's journey, and to live life for heavy heart's not a good way to live. No. So we look at the way that a lot of people live before we wake up. Yeah. And I use that terminology, wake up, loosely, but before you go down that path, a lot of us don't know. So you look at our nutrition, and we're eating, and we're just pumping pumping any of that stuff, forgive me, Kellogg's.
You must be having some Nutri-Grain.
Sorry?
Yeah, you must be having some mad Nutri-Grain.
Dude, but the thing is, it's when you look at when I had as a child, that's not healthy for you, man.
Nah, it's shit, bro. It's nothing,
Okay, no offense. Please don't cancel me, all right?
No, it's full of sugar, bro. It's and corrosive for your teeth.
Yeah, it's not
bones.
Good for you, man. Yeah. And then also, I guess the milk they give us, not full cream on top.
Yeah.
You look at breakfast, the most important meal of the day. But for example, now if I have breakfast, for example, I feel sluggish. I'm not good. If I eat 11 or 12 o'clock, I feel amazing. If I push it to 1 or 2 o'clock, I feel even better. But then I'm just overly hungry, and I'm just going to eat everything. Okay, as everyone can see with my frame here. But the thing is, it was never really taught to us. I completely forgot where we're going with this, but that's okay.
You know what, bro? I think it doesn't have to be taught if you're living in a way that's in alignment with it. So our ancestors weren't living in a way where processed food was on the table. So there's something about the way that we're living in the system that creates that way of living that is not actually conducive with what's good for us.
Yeah.
That's the really important, I think, realization a lot of people have to have. Because it's not about saying any particular group of people is bad, which a lot of people go to.
Yeah.
It's about saying, as human beings, there are generally things that are good for us that we're all sort of in tune with to different extents, but most of us can feel it on at least a surface level. Like, you know when your body is in pain, and you know that your body is often in pain because we don't move it enough, right? Sitting down all day in these fucking chairs that destroy our backs,
Yes.
wearing shoes that push our toes together like this so that the joints of our feet and our ankles and our legs don't actually develop the way they're supposed to. All of these things aren't actually in alignment with what we are. What we are is a very mobile species with great nimble dexterity and the ability to move quickly and to be in different kinds of positions. And we're supposed to be working all like millions of muscles in our body. I don't know if there's millions, but like we are so complex, right?
Yeah.
Biologically.
Yeah.
And and this is just an example of a point I guess I'm coming back to, I'm trying to make. But the way that we're living is very far disconnected from those intrinsic elements of who we are. Another example is relationally, right? We're very complex relational beings. Our speech, our ability to speak, and the part of our brain that manifests that language, the impact of language schemas on how we perceive the world and what we can create. But we are diluting and simplifying the way that we communicate with each other. It started, believe it or not, with the written word, which you wouldn't think of as bad, but oral communication is far more complex and lights up far more of our brain than writing does. Writing is stagnant. All right, you write it down and it's written. Oral communication is constantly in flux and flow.
Oral communication is also how most, or maybe all of them, all of the ancient civilizations would bring their stories down and teach history.
That's right.
And the thing is, when you destroy language, so when you look in time, how many people still hold traditional language? How many people, or how many who still talks? So you've got many indigenous cultures in Australia and Aboriginals. You also got Native Americans. You've also got ancient Europeans. So that actually, when you go back in time, you actually see it. That those words have power. It's vibration, energy. So does the written. Yeah. So does the written, but you write it down and then you'd voice it out. Okay, and that's a harmonic, and that's why it's so important. And a lot of us now actually aren't even talking. A lot of us now is just texting, text. Back in the day, we used to call each other. You know, on the phone, on the home phones, on the Nokias or whatever you want. We used to call, and then we used to hang out. We used to talk to each other. Now it's all just texting. Everyone just text. There's nothing wrong with texting, or commenting as well. Yeah. So that's why for me it's important that we start talking again. That's why I think these podcasts are also blowing up, and these videos. Actually, if you look at the algorithm for Instagram and Facebook, I don't know Facebook, but Instagram, like now it's not pictures anymore. It's now content, like it's videos. So again, people are talking. That's what catches you. So it's always in a flux, in a cycle. But ultimately, the spoken word is the most important because there's nuances and there's all little different things, and you might read something a particular way, but it wasn't intended that way. But when you speak it, you generally pick up exactly what the person, if you're in tune and you're feeling it, you can feel that, and it'll hit you in a different part of yourself, So yeah. Why did you talked about, you went straight into like becoming a lawyer. You didn't want to become a lawyer, but why did you choose to become a lawyer then? Like, why you obviously went through high school unless you're some genius, but why did you choose to become a lawyer? Because you also hit on something before that I want to touch on, which is you were a mediator. So a big part of law is also being a mediator, okay, between two parties. And there was also another part there, which is, okay, here's another thing for you. You said you didn't fit in, but now you're not, okay, so you're not a criminal lawyer. You're not what's the other, so you're not your bloody, what's the other lawyers, your workers' compensation, so your personal injury lawyers, and what's the other one, big business law, commercial law, all that, that's all the usual, that's where everyone is, and they shove them into a building, and you're all together, and you're just one big unit. But you're like, fuck that, I'm going to go human rights. I'm going to go down this path, and it's completely different, and there's not many of us. So even though you didn't fit in when you were younger, and then you wanted to fit in, but you still went down a path of law that does not fit in with the consensus there. So I think you're just always meant to be an outlier. You're always meant to be different. You're meant to be you, and you're just someone that goes against the grain and has to be you.
But I don't think I'm against the grain.
Yeah.
You know, the only reason that there aren't way more human rights lawyers, everybody goes into law wanting to be a human rights lawyer.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like
I would have gone in for criminal lawyer, man.
Dude, yeah, okay, some people. But even a criminal lawyer is kind of a human rights lawyer, because what are you doing? You're defending
You're right about
people
that.
the system's
You're
trying
right.
to fuck.
Yeah.
And the system's not fair, bro.
No.
So a lot of people, I would argue, that's a whole other conversation about whether the criminal justice system in the form could ever have any positive impact, which I don't think it could. I'll leave that aside. But a criminal lawyer is kind of a human rights lawyer as well. It's like someone who wants to help the individual person against the state.
Yeah.
That's human rights.
Yeah, okay.
So like the right to liberty is a core human right. So there are a lot of people who want to do that. It is a different kind of person. You're right. But then human rights lawyer, first year law, everyone's like, yeah, I want to be social justice, this, that, I want to help people, I want to this, that's why I became a lawyer. They all say it, but then it kind of gets like beaten out of you. And people get distracted by the carrots that are dangling in front of them, like the reputation and money and all this bullshit.
Money, yeah.
There's not many options to be a human rights lawyer. Like there's like probably 4 human rights practices in the whole country. They're all government funded, like actual specialist human rights practices. It's very hard to get in. There'll be like 2-3 lawyers working there. They're all government funded, so it's hard to get into those jobs. You don't get paid much. And then and that's it. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, maybe you could become a barrister, but not everyone wants to become a barrister. It's a pretty big jump. You could be a human rights barrister.
Are there any human rights barristers?
There are definitely barristers that call themselves human rights barristers.
Okay.
There are. There are some barristers who are doing really good work for certain areas of human rights law. I haven't met any barristers who have a holistic perspective on what law is and are publicly expressing it. And that's what I'm saying I'm not an outlier about, because what I'm doing is I'm going back to, as best I can, what law actually is. And I believe that every person who's become a lawyer has become a lawyer for a reason. I think they're a particular type of person. I think it's in their story, I think he said soul contract. I don't know if he said contract, but like, let's say,
you can say that.
Let's say there's such thing as soul contracts, or you know, it's in their spirit to be a law person. That's why they became a lawyer. So they resonate with what I'm saying. Every time I say this to a lawyer, they light up, because they realize, like, oh, this is what I'm searching for. Like, nobody who's working in the corporate firms is happy. I met one guy who I think was happy, one guy. And I used to ask everyone, are you fulfilled by this? Because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I was depressed. I was trying to figure it out. One of the ways I'll do it is ask the senior lawyers when I was in that world. Yeah. And I'd be like, are you happy? Like, do you like your job? Do you like what you're doing? And no, they were all messed up. But except one guy, an old guy, who I think genuinely maybe liked it. So he trips me out, because I don't know if it's like I would have almost had a theory that you couldn't be happy there, but you probably can.
You can have a special type of person.
Yeah, you
special type of person who enjoys that hustle and bustle, and it's, you know, it's definitely a special kind of person. Same as I see him within the engineering field. Yeah. You know, even now I'm starting to question, do I want to go down this path for the rest of my life, working 12-hour days, 5 days a week, and still taking stuff home on the weekend, processing, like, you know, have we made money? We're not making money. Oh my God. You know, just waking up in the middle of the night saying, oh, I've got to find $500,000. Hopefully anyone that's listening to this from work, that's not the case. I found the $500,000, okay?
Is anyone from your work going to listen to this?
I've got no idea. I've got one guaranteed listener.
Yeah?
My mother.
God bless your mum.
Maybe, who knows?
Shout out to your mum.
Yeah. She's a lovely lady. No, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens here. Maybe no one listens to it. Maybe the algorithm picks it up and it goes viral. But you're right about that. There's these lawyers, they started law for a certain reason.
Yeah.
And it gets beaten out of them. And also, I guess it's just a system. Like, we can go against the system as much as we want to speak out against it, but it's just the system that, and this whole structure that we live within. You know, bills, paying. Got to pay bills, mortgages, houses, and just this lifestyle here. So, I guess you touched on something that's really important, which is when you speak to lawyers and you ask these things and you get them fired up. And I guess that's all we can really do is be ourselves, be that light. And then they see that, and then it triggers something within them. That's all we can do, and that's probably the best thing that we should be doing. I wanted to go into a couple of other things here because we could seriously talk. I reckon we could be talking for hours and hours and hours and hours, especially in this comfortable studio here with Mr. Nick over here. But you know what I really want to know, because I'll get a bit into COVID, but we'll get into that. I want to get into okay, my name is Daniel Stoichevsky. What's my rights as a human? What are my rights? Okay, and I'm just talking like plainly, what are my rights? Because I was thinking about this, like, what is it? Do I have a right to freedom? I have a right to free speech. Like, what do these things mean? Obviously, a right to freedom, well, over the last couple of years, we saw that was actually getting pressed down a bit. Not wholly. I still had a right to choose whether I wanted to partake in a certain medical procedure, but my mobility was stunted. So basically, what are our human fucking rights? What is my right as a human? When I'm born, what are my rights, bro? You know, do we have like an implicit, like a world right? Do we have a universal right? I know that the answer, if you went down to down a spiritual path, a holistic path, an ultimate truth path of the universe, but I don't know if you can put that concept into a judge at court, okay? Because we're within that system. So what I want to understand is, like, when we're born, what are our fundamental rights? Really long-winded question, bro. I'm sorry, but by the time it comes out, man, it's got to come out in a poem, you know?
Yeah, that's okay, man. I'm going to return to something I was trying to say before, but you have to understand I'm trying to answer your question.
Bro, go for it, please.
Because like when you ask the question, what rights are we born with? Everyone's going to disagree about that by nature of their upbringing, their conditioning, their everything. And it would depend on what culture you're from, what the rules of that culture are. It depends on so many variables. So, but what I try to angle it towards instead is, what is the truth, and what are the ways that we can try to measure that truth? We're disadvantaged because we grew up divorced from the stories that contain that truth that our ancestors have been telling for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Right? I'll speak for myself. I grew up separated from that, and that has made it more difficult for me than it should be to identify what's true and what's not. But one of the ways that I can do it is, apart from studying that stuff, is by constantly observing and learning from my own experience as a human being, because ultimately all we have is our own experience. And my experience tells me pretty clearly what's good for me and what's not good for me. So I used the food example before. It's not just food. If I watch YouTube videos for an hour, which sometimes happens, right? I'm procrastinating, whatever. I watch YouTube videos for an hour, I feel like shit after. Like, my eyes hurt. I'm like, my body's not good. My mind is like foggy. Like, if I'm watching rubbish, I mean, or if I'm on social media too much, or if I drink alcohol, right? Like, there are things that I know aren't actually good for me. Whereas when I'm in a good place and I'm observing proper rituals and practices, I'm respecting my body, I'm consuming things that are positive for my mind, I'm speaking the truth, I'm acting with integrity and being a good father, a good husband, all this stuff, I feel great. And I get a lot of feedback that I'm on the right path. And over time, it's just my intuition as a human being, right? I'm just honing my ability through observation of what's true and what's not. And when I compare that and take that to what my learning and study is in law and sociology, and I love history, so I'm always looking at history and the way that different cultures operated and stuff like that, I start to form my own perspective on what the truth is. And it's through what some people might call a relationship with God, or with the divine, or with the truth. So why am I saying all of that? Because what rights are we born with? Well, we're born with a reasonable expectation or entitlement to live in a way that's actually conducive to our healthy development into what we actually are. That makes sense?
Yes.
I think that's the fucking unarguable with tether that we can all stick to and say, okay, but that it requires a lot of honesty, because there'll be debates about whether things are good for us or not.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets messy, because the society and the system that we live in propagates those debates intentionally and unintentionally. So to get over that problem, my solution is to go back in time and look at some of the systems and societies that a lot of people either don't know about or deny that they existed, where the way that they were actually living was much more in alignment with what I can say is good for us based on my own experience, or we can agree is good for us based on our experience, right? If there's a culture or a system where the way that they actually operate on a day-to-day basis is more they're eating healthier food, more nutritionally abundant food, they're moving more, they're in more complex social and family relationship structures, they have more rituals which, for example, encourage the initiation of boys into men, such that men grow into healthy men who don't have some of the traumas and difficulties that a lot of men today have, and same for women. That's how I make judgment calls on what's true and what's not. And I then, because I work as a human rights lawyer within this legal system, and to be a bit more practical with you, I translate that into the language that we all understand here and that we use. So one of the ways I do that is the cardinal principle of human rights law in this system is what they call self-determination, which is the ability to choose the direction of your own life. And it's a way of saying freedom. You were talking about freedom before. To me, it's a slight distortion of what the actual truth is on that point. Tell me if I'm being confusing, but
no, please
this
go.
is like, I'm sort of talking in circles, right? So self-determination, cardinal principle of human rights law, it's the first part and article in almost all the international human rights covenants and treaties. And it's another way of saying freedom. It's another way of saying free will. But if you go back further in the past, at a lot of indigenous cultures, and I want to make a point so people don't feel excluded from this conversation. You said European cultures before. European indigenous cultures had the same stories and the same messages that I'm talking about.
100%.
Celtic culture, Gaelic culture, Germanic culture, all these different cultures.
All the Balkans as
all
well.
saying the same
all
thing.
The OG, you know, all the old school, all the OGs, you know.
Yeah.
That's where it all stemmed from.
Yeah. So it's in your blood as well, no matter where you're from.
It's in everyone's.
Speaking to the listener. Yeah.
It's in everyone's blood.
Yeah.
It's in everyone's blood.
Yeah.
It's just been quite diluted through time.
Yeah, it has.
And then when you got the Indigenous Australians and you came here 200 years ago and they'll still speak in their language.
Yeah.
But then through all of us, we had all these other things in Europe, that's another topic another time. And you understand exactly what I'm saying. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. So I was about to go somewhere.
With self-determination.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So if you go back older, it's not as simple as self-determination. It's the best way I've heard it expressed that speaks to me is it's the sovereignty of self in the sanctity of community. So, because a lot of people talk about sovereignty at the moment as well, which is another way of saying self-determination as well. It might be a bit more layered than self-determination, but I see them as similar. So, sovereignty of self, very important. But you can't really be sovereign as an individual unless you're in the sanctity of a community. It doesn't work. Human beings aren't individuals. No. We're relational beings. Everything exists in relation to other things and people. And again, there's something else we could talk about there. But so you have to have both. And in indigenous frameworks, you have both sovereignty of self and sanctity of community. You can't have a sanctimonious community if you don't have sovereign individuals within it. But at the same time, there's an interplay and an interdependence there where sovereign individuals understand that in order to operate within a sanctimonious collective, there has to be shared virtues and principles that everybody agrees about. In our society here, there's a similar idea in terms of principles and virtues, kind of, but they're diluted, distorted. Nobody can agree about what they are. And everybody is disconnected from the older human cultures who had a much closer connection to it. Although the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander original people here, in my opinion, have one of the purest, strongest tethers to that of any people around the world, because they've maintained their oral tradition and their stories, and they're still living it, but they've been attacked heavy. So they're dealing with a lot of pain and trauma as well. And that attack is so strong because of how strong that tether is, in my opinion. There's a correlation there. Anyway, go back to your question, what rights are we born with? The best way for me to answer that is we're born with, it's what I said before, we're born deserving to be an actual human being and not to have that humanness diluted by ulterior interests that harm us. And I think that is a possible idea, and there are structures of human societies that have existed in the past that were not as harmful for us as the one we're currently living in. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of things about that. You have such a way with words. You're a great storyteller.
Thanks, bro.
Very charismatic in that. I was getting caught up in your eyes, as you're talking there, especially for the lighting. Now, so I understand and I agree with that. But the main thing, and sort of as you're speaking more and more, I can see how it falls into this system, It's like you got to learn how to so basically you got to learn how to translate that, all those immutable laws or all that, into corporation talk, into government talk, into system, into our legal system talk. And you got to figure out how to speak that argument to them in their terms. So it's into their system, because we live in that system unless you want to pull yourself out, which is extremely difficult. So I'm understanding that. So you definitely answered my question. What else hoping to gain from that? Do you know, I've got a couple of notes here, but the thing is, going into those, like people, like we'll put up all your socials and your website later, and people can join onto your mail list, which has got all the information there, and they can listen to you talk there. Do you know much? Because during the whole COVID debacle and fuckery, there was a lot of court cases, and you were a part of those court. You were part of some of those, not all of them, but you were a part of some of those court cases.
Yeah.
And that's how I know when I was going through at work, when all the lockdowns and all the mandates were coming through, and especially luckily here in New South Wales, it wasn't as stringent as the other ones. It just depended on where you lived. So I was lucky enough to live up in the Blue Mountains, away from, I didn't realize I lived in such a like a high value area. I thought that we were probably going to be the first to be told that we had to get the stuff. But during that time on LinkedIn, I remember when I was feeling hopeless, it was very, very difficult. It was very difficult, and I'm sure for many other people. I found one of your LinkedIn posts, and it was like human rights lawyer, and I read it, and as I read it, like it just made the legal argument made so much sense, and it's just like it was well put together, and that was the first time I actually came across you, and it gave me a sense of hope reading that. And it made things easier for me, and the decision that I made and what I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, so there's other people out there. So it's not like the whole system's against us. There are people that are genuinely out there that are fighting this. So there were court cases that went out there. I guess in the sense of what they were seeking, which was to have a ruling in their favor, I guess, can we say that they all failed?
Yeah. At that time, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, there was that many court cases coming up that these guys here had to start saying, okay, we've really got to look at this and what we're doing and which way we're going. Well, I can conspire as much as I want in my thoughts there, but that's the way that it looked. You took on a couple of court cases there with a couple of other people's, but your angle was down the lines of, can you talk about the ones that you were spearheading, the ones that you were involved with the most?
Yeah, man.
Because you weren't a part of the, Kassam versus Hazard one. with Tony Nikolic and whatnot there, but you had your own ones there. So I think can you talk about those ones? Yeah.
So those cases were about the mandates, like the vaccine mandates, and trying to say they're unconstitutional and unlawful. The cases that I had were against the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration, and the Department of Health, and Brendan Murphy, who was the Secretary of the Department of Health.
Yep.
And it was administrative law, so it was judicial review. So, there was a few cases. So, a judicial review is when a government minister or department makes a decision, and you challenge the decision to say it's either unlawful, which is judicial review, or its merits are flawed. They didn't take appropriate factual considerations into account when making the decision, so it's sort of materially flawed. That's called a merits review. But we're doing the first one, so we're challenging the legality of the decision of the TGA to actually provisionally approve the COVID vaccines. We started by challenging all of the vaccines, and it was on the basis that under the Therapeutic Goods Act, you can only provisionally approve a drug, which is what they were provisionally approved, if that drug materially helps a serious or seriously debilitating or life-threatening illness. That's one of the criteria. And another criteria is there's no other drug available that would medicate that harm. So you need to provisionally approve this drug that hasn't been tested properly because there's nothing else that might help. So at the time, there was a couple of things going on. One, ivermectin was available, which up until that point was a very uncontroversial medicine that has won, the creator of which won a Nobel Prize for creating it. And now it's accepted by everybody that actually is very effective against COVID.
Oh, now it does.
Even in mainstream science now,
yes,
it's accepted.
It does now.
India used it exclusively to completely avoid any COVID.
People were buying stuff, ivermectin from India, and people were taking the horse paste version, which is used for horses. For the parasites. So people were putting them on biscuits and eating them and taking the paste. So, and they found that it helped.
They actually amended that part of the Therapeutic Goods Act in the process of these cases, just before we brought one of them, to remove that section, so that the ivermectin, so that it didn't have to be the case that there was no other medicine that deals with it. But there was still this thing about it has to be a seriously debilitating illness, life-threatening, like it's killing people at mass. It's an emergency, so you have to provisionally approve this drug, right? It's not supposed to be something you can just do. It's meant to be for very extreme circumstances. Yes. So we're saying the minister didn't follow the law when he made that decision. We had like 3,000 pages of evidence on why it wasn't a life-threatening or seriously debilitating illness. It was what we all know it to be now because everybody's had it and knows that it's not that bad. It's nothing. So it's not nothing, but it's not that bad.
It's not as bad as what they were. Like we used to see videos of people falling over in China.
Yeah, that was all bullshit.
Yeah. So it's not nothing, but and people do get sick, and people probably did pass away from it. But you got to look at all the comorbidities and all that type of stuff. So yeah, that I don't have enough experience, or I can't talk about that because I'm not an expert in that. But it's when I had COVID, I had it two times. Like the first time I could tell something wasn't right, but I wasn't scared. And the second time I got it was not as bad as the first time, so my body was fighting it off. But going back to saying that sort of it wasn't en masse as bad as what we thought. Maybe it was actually the other stuff that they were doing and putting people on ventilators and whatnot. But again, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I'll leave it. I won't talk about it for now, but my opinion on that is colored by this thing called germ theory versus terrain theory.
Okay.
But I won't go there. So we were challenging the legality of the decisions. So the first thing that happened is the federal court stopped us from going to hearing by using this legal technicality to say, oh, you're not allowed to bring this case because the plaintiffs that you have don't have a sufficient interest in what the case is about to bring it. They don't have enough at stake. They're not involved enough in. So there's this rule within administrative law that you can bring a case if you have standing to bring it, meaning you're a sufficiently aggrieved party in the context of the decision you're challenging to be able to bring the case.
Weren't we all aggrieved?
Well, not only that, but the people that we had as plaintiffs, like one of them was a foster father who has been looking after a kid since they were 2 days old. And he's in South Australia. In South Australia, the government mandated that all foster kids have to have the jab. And he was against it, and his wife was against it. And this is his kid, right? He's had the baby since they were 2 days old. It's been like, I think the kid was 7 or 8 years old. He does everything for the kid, right? They educate the kid. They take the kid to the doctor even when they want to. They feed the kid. They care for the kid. It's his kid. He's making a decision as a responsible parent, saying, I don't think this is necessary for my kid, which a lot of parents would agree with.
Of course, yeah.
And the government is saying, too bad, we're making a decision because we technically have guardianship over the kid because it's a foster kid in this kind of a roundabout way. He has to have the jab. But the court said, no, he doesn't have a sufficient interest in the decision to...
Because he wasn't a parent? Because he wasn't a direct parent, wasn't a blood parent, or...
No, they're making the law on standing very, very narrow. So they're saying that the type of interest you have to have has to have a very literal connection to the actual provision within the statute that you're challenging. Okay. So the nature of the provision is one about the approval of drugs. And they're essentially saying has to be somebody who's affected by the actual approval process on a very material and personal level. That's basically what they're saying.
It's very washy.
Yeah, it's a very technical and narrow way to avoid letting this guy have standing. But mind you, in standing cases, generally, it's not even an issue. Like, it's never the case that standing, for example, is separated from what the rest of the case is about, and you have a separate hearing about it and argue about it for a whole day. Usually it's like 5 minutes at the start of the hearing. Why was that separated? You could imagine that possibly it's because if you separate them, you don't have to look at the 3,000 pages of evidence and deal with it. Because they still would have had to have done the hearing if it was on the same day. Yeah. Because they wouldn't have made a decision straight away. So you'd have you wouldn't even argue about standing usually, but even if you did, it'd go for like 10 minutes and then you get into the rest of the case. Anyway, that's what happened with the first one. We then narrowed it to just Moderna and just for 6-month-old to 5-year-old kids. And we used different plaintiffs to get around standing. So we had 6 plaintiffs, all strategically chosen to try to cover all the bases on standing. And we went to the High Court instead of the Federal Court. And we said, all right, don't worry about the other ones. Let's just save kids who obviously everybody agrees don't need it, because that rule has to be life-threatening or seriously debilitating. It was less controversial at the time for people to accept that COVID wasn't dangerous for kids than adults, especially babies. And then you have to do the cost-benefit of giving them an untested drug. It's been tested by the pharmaceutical companies for 3 months and not in any kind of long-term trial, still in clinical trials, provisionally approved, and they want to inject babies with it. Also didn't get to go to a hearing in this time because the High Court said there's too many scientific controversies in the case and it's going to be too much of a drain on our resources. You have to have this argument in the Federal Court. We're not going to look at it. We were of the opinion that we'd already been through the Federal Court with the other case. We saw what they did, and that it wouldn't be worth wasting the public's money because they were all funding it through donations on the barristers and the court fees in the Federal Courts. We're not trying to bring cases for the sake of bringing cases. So we cut it. We didn't go to the Federal Court. We said, High Court, we had a shot. Yeah. Because of the type of decision we're asking them to make as well is really a High Court type case. So we dropped it. They were that was called the Australian babies case. That they were the 2 biggest cases. And then there were lots of cases for individuals or smaller groups that I was doing and still am doing some of them as well. So yeah, they were the biggest ones that I did in the first 2 years, like 2021, 2022. Although that they didn't win, one thing that happened was during the course of the case against the Moderna vaccine, Moderna was pulled as a drug that could be given to that age group. And I think it's because of our case. And I'm hoping that means a few babies didn't get it. And that makes the incredible effort that we went to worth it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Alone, yeah. I'm sure it did other things too, but yeah.
I'm sure as well. And you can read between the lines. It's like it doesn't go all the way there. You don't actually get the court case doesn't go your way, but you read between the lines, behind the scenes, you can see things are happening. And that's when I said, like, a lot of these cases, they failed in the sense of terms of getting a verdict in there. in their favor. But you look at the whole scale of things, and it wasn't just in Australia; it was all over the world. So one main thing that I wanted to find out was, because I know how much like everyone was going through stress during that time. You were going through your stress. You made a decision that you wanted to go down this path, so you weren't working anymore in the firm sense, and you were doing your own thing. Other people were, whether they felt coerced and felt pressured into going down the path of what they did. Other people, like, you know, likes of myself and others, like, nah, fuck yous, we're not doing this, like, you know, for our own reasons. So we made those decisions, okay? But now I'll go back to you. So now you've made your decision. Everyone else around you is making decisions, a lot of turmoil, and you're now doing these court cases. You're invested. I don't know how much more invested you can be, because you're going there for yourself, but you're going for a whole other people as well. Everyone is like counting on these cases, yeah? That not everyone, well, fucking probably half the country didn't care, or not less than half. With the numbers, we don't know. But a lot of people were now counting on these cases. So I want to ask with you, how was your mental state during that time? How much pressure did you feel? Because I know myself, if I'm a lawyer just now and I'm in court, I'll be telling everyone to get fucked. Like, you're fuck you, judge. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, shut up, mate. Like, you're trying to give me offers before. Now you've pulled them. I don't like you. You're shady. Like me, I can't go down that path of being very controlled. All right. But the thing is, you had to keep it together. You had to keep on working, and you kept on getting pushed back here, pushed back there. So I just want to understand, like, with your mental state, how did you cope with it all? Are you okay now? But just seriously, how did you feel for all that pressure? Because I imagine there would have been a lot of pressure, man. There would have been a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, the burden of trying to do what I know is right in that system is very fucking heavy, man. And I struggle with it all the time. I don't know if part of that is due to my being young and not very experienced. It's possible that will get easier over time, but as of now, yeah, it's very hard, man. And I'm pretty open. Like, I tell people all the time that sometimes I say it in a silly way, like I'm just making a joke, but yeah, it's very, very challenging. That's why I've tried to escape being a lawyer so many times in my life. There's lots of times I've made a decision not to be a lawyer anymore, and I've done other stuff for a while. I also know within myself, and this is where I guess my knowledge of myself comes in, which is a journey, but I've become a lot more intimate with myself over the past probably 5, 6 years, 7 years. I grew up in a particular environment that I found very difficult and challenging. And one of my coping mechanisms for that was to escape. And I escaped in lots of different ways. Drugs, all the stuff as a young man you do, like pornography, smoking weed, drinking.
All the good stuff, mate.
Well, like, whatever way I could. Music, like, there's simple ways to escape too. Like, I even did music like as a thing to avoid dealing with some shit in my life for a while. Like, I make massive decisions that I would tell myself a story about, where part of the real reason for the decision was escapism. Not all of it. A lot of it was positive stuff too. It's not like, it's not like I did anything bad. I was trying to find my way. But because I learned that about myself, I apply that framework to my current life now, and I've become a lot more comfortable with discomfort and difficulty and challenge. And I don't necessarily react to it by escaping anymore. And I know I have this fucking feeling that I'm supposed to be a lawyer, which makes it a lot easier than when I didn't know, because the uncertainty is what the killer was, and the feeling of I'm trapped. I don't know if I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. What's my life about? What the fuck's going on? Now it's like, I know I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. So as hard as it is, it's very fucking hard. It's doable, and there's elements of it that are fulfilling, because I feel like I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on, and I know it's making me stronger and better. And that lawman journey you talked about before, it's an exciting journey to be on. Like, I like that journey. Like, and I'm only at the beginning of it. So what an amazing privilege to be able to walk that path if that's what happens. But I think that's what's going to happen. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Like, what an amazing honor to have that role. But it's like everything amazing, it's hard. Like, that's part of life. Yin and yang, you know, life is suffering, as the Buddhists say. That's what they're saying. It's like, you need that. It's actually a part of what we're here for. So it is hard, but yeah, it's what I'm meant to be doing.
You didn't buckle, bro.
Not yet.
No, not yet. But
not yet.
Nah, definitely want an answer, because the way I definitely got some from that. I know other people will, and that's great. Anyways, do you have any websites, socials? Where can people reach you on? Also, I think just quickly, do you have like a little program running where you like pay what you can or something like that, or what's like? I think I read that, or like, can people reach you for advice and that type of stuff? Like, just quickly, and then we can finish up.
So the website is Maart's Method, M for Mary, AATS method.com.au. You can find most stuff on there. There's a pay what you can legal clinic. So we do this thing where if you need legal advice about some situation you're in, you can rock up and you don't have to pay if you can't, or you pay what you can pay. So it's like a exchange of value, where based on someone's actual practical circumstances plus whatever value they think they got from it, they can just choose to pay whatever. And if it's nothing, that's all good. Like, that's part of what we're trying to make sure people have access to, because it's fucking hard to get legal advice.
It is, man.
And we also, obviously take on cases and stuff as well. I'm trying to grow an alternative kind of legal practice in Australia, because there isn't. We're the only independent human rights specialist firm in Australia, very small right now, but there's no other human rights specialist firms that don't receive government funding, which means we're independent. We can do and say what we want to an extent, but it's a pretty big extent, because I've been saying a lot of crazy shit and I'm somehow still going. So I want to actually turn that into something that's bigger than it is now, and that's what we're currently working on, making it a bigger platform with more resources and more sustainable, so that we can do more big work that's really important for the defending and advocating of truth. You can follow along with that journey. Website, we're on all the social media platforms. And one way you can follow is through Substack, which is the mailing list, which is like a newsletter platform where I post articles and videos for people. And it's called Maart's Mail. So if you go to Substack and type in MAATS Mail, you'll find it and you can follow.
It's very insightful. I actually got a lot from that. I was actually I was doing my research for that, and I just went so far down the rabbit hole. It's like, just put that to the side. I've got them all printed out here, but that's just it's very insightful, and the way that you break things down is fantastic. Anyways, Peter, thank you very much for being the first guest on my podcast, my show, whatever you want to call it.
What is it called, bro? Does it have a name?
It's still so new, but I'm going to be probably calling it Stodgify.
Stodgify.
That's right.
All right.
Because no one can say my surname, so they all call me Stodger.
I thought it was Stoichevsky.
But you can say it, but other people can't. Can you say my surname?
Wait. But you can't put the wrong pronunciation of his surname in the name of the thing.
Yes, I can, mate, because I'm very roundabout, and I'm back to front, contradictory of everything, mate.
Okay, sorry, you're right. You can.
It's still on the works, but I believe it's going to be Stodgify.
Okay.
But to be honest, I don't really care. I do care with branding, this and that, but we'll get to that after. Let's just get the conversations happening. And it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much. It was an honor to meet you at the pizza shop in Penrith that day, and with your daughter and your wife. And from there, it's just keep on blossoming and growing and taking it to new levels. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, brother. Honor and privilege to be your first guest.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Peter. All right, done.